Hey, Raymond, it's not yet a race week. It's not yet after the race week, right? But we're here right before. Clara Manzano here in behalf of Raymond Cudala, former junior international Philippine Car of the Year. Claudia Perrine is on her way, hustling through the traffic. It rained in Metro Manila. But wow, there is no better way to start off the F1 season with an F1 Kwentuhan session or chat, as we say. So, who the heck are we again to be talking F1? But who the heck am I, right, Raymond? You're a Carter of the
Who
Year.
the heck am I too?
Oh, I just gave your credentials right now. But let's bring in our distinguished guest all the way from Hong Kong, a place you also call home, Raymond. We got
I agree,
Matthew
yeah.
Marsh. Yay.
Hello there. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time too, Matthew. We appreciate it. Before we just kick off with our F1 and racing chat, how's life been treating you as of late?
Can't complain. The weather here is beautiful today, and I went out for a run in the hills and thought about what we're going to discuss tonight. So I'm excited about that as well.
Raymond, you regret leaving Hong Kong? The weather there's great. It was crazy here. Tropical weather.
Well, yeah, but last time I was there, it was really, really great in Hong Kong compared to what it is now.
Okay. So, anyway, Matthew, before we get started with our F1 chat, we want to bring this detailed analysis to the people because, as I keep telling everyone, who the heck are we to be saying it? We're just a bunch of well, I'm just a fan and a podcaster, Raymond's guy with the credentials, like you, of course. We want to get to it first and foremost. Could you tell us about your motorsport background?
I can. I'm just a fan as well, and I have news, which is that everybody who works in Formula One, certainly most of the people that I've had the pleasure to work with in the teams, the journalists, the drivers, they're all massive fans as well. So when you say, I know you're saying it tongue in cheek, who the hell are we to talk about F1? We're exactly the right people to talk about. You're exactly the right people to talk about F1. Our fans, our viewers, listeners are exactly the right people to have comments because that's the beauty of sport. And so anyway, that's the key point. I mean, I'm going complete. I'm not even answering your question. I will have forgotten what your question is by the time but I'll tell you an example of this, which is there's a journalist called Simon Aaron who has been writing for decades and no longer covers Formula One and writes for Motorsport magazine, I think. And I remember standing with him at the window looking over the grid of the Singapore Grand Prix start, probably 5 or 6 years ago, as the cars were on the grid ready to go. And he said, doesn't change, does it? The feeling, the tingling on the back of your neck. It doesn't matter how many Grand Prix or other forms of motorsport you go and watch. When you're watching the start, and same for a kart race. And that's because we're all fans. So that's a good long answer to a simple question.
Well, I don't mind, but again, because you're telling us who the heck is Matthew Marsh for the people who do not know you yet. You're saying you're just a fan, but you do know your stuff. I mean, take a look at the screen, everyone. Champion 2004 Porsche Carrera Cup Asia. So you have those credentials, we could say. Not everyone here's a Porsche Carrera Cup champion. And wow, you competed in Le Mans. So you have the credibility, I can say.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity when I was 17 or 18 to race, and I was really bad. And so I had the opportunity to stop and go and get a real job. And, so there's a lesson there. But then later on, about 10 years later, I suppose, having gone out into the world and learned about life and business and how to tackle problems, I suppose, I had the second opportunity to go racing. And, having done some karting in the meantime and having made some money, so I could afford to buy a Caterham racing car, Caterham 7 racing car, pretty much entry level. And then got, if you like, better and better. And then the Porsche Carrera Cup Asia was a brilliant platform because it meant, the critical thing about motorsport is very capital intensive.
Yes.
You need a lot of money. And I was able to go out and sell to sponsors the concept of being involved with Porsche Carrera Cup Asia and me as a guy who is sometimes on the television talking about Formula One. If it had just been me, it would have been like, who's this guy? Who the hell is he? Who the heck is he? So Good, right? Sponsor's dream. So, and it all kind of tied together. And there are various moments that you turn one way or the other, and you have success or failure. Now, you've been very kind and listed these sort of highlights of my career on track. And of course, the reality is there were many points when I failed and got things wrong. But we forget about those when we're telling a story. And but the bottom line is, to answer your question, I'm very fortunate to go to race on track. This is a picture of the Nürburgring 24 Hours in 2008 with Aston Martin. I won the Porsche Carrera Cup in 2004, raced at Le Mans a couple of times, did Daytona 24 Hours, 5 times, and did all of these great races. Along the way, I learned about the sponsorship business because I needed to generate commercial partnerships for a lot of the racing I talked about. The drive with Aston Martin came on merit, and it came on merit because I'd generated money to do other racing that had shown people that I was capable of driving the car to some degree. And then so that's sort of doing the driving, the commercial part, and then the third string to my bow, so to speak, is the TV. I was very fortunate to start in 1994 covering Formula One on what became Fox Sports Asia. You might remember it as Prime Sports back then, and then Star TV, and then eventually Fox Sports Asia. And so and those three things tie together. And again, like I'm saying, now that we look at it in the year 2022, it looks like it was a really well planned, organized, executed, plan to get to be a motorsport executive personality, whatever you want to call it. It certainly wasn't, but it's very lucky. I'm very fortunate how it's turned out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So our other host, Claudia Perrin, just came in. So yes, Claudia.
Hi, Matthew. So sorry, I came from a football match. So yeah, I'm kind of late. So
no problem at all. It's good to have you here. Glad you made it through the rain.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't raining on my drive back. So
then, what's your reason for? Sorry, we were given this excuse that Clara was very kind and said you're driving through the rain.
It was
sort of thing, and then
not when I was driving.
You basically stopped off for dinner with some friends, and then
I did. I had some beers, and
it's 8 o'clock already. What's going on?
So I'm like, oh gosh. So I'm just gonna have to follow and then pick up on the questions because I think I missed the first question. I missed the first part of the show. So
no worry. Yes. Yeah.
Don't worry.
But it was raining on my side of town. I can say at the least. I don't know about Raymond. He lives close to me. But you're telling us about your sponsorship experience. I think you also run a consultancy. People know you as that guy. Talking about F1 or motorsport in the camera. But I think you have that consultancy group of yours too.
Yeah. So I was very lucky that I, as I mentioned before, I went away and got involved in business, and then I came back and started racing again, age 27 or whatever it was. And so I already kind of understood that if you've got a big problem, if you've got a mountain to climb or you've got a hill to climb, you take it one step at a time. And as a racing driver, and Raymond knows this, you started and you think, well, I need to be fitter than everybody else. I need to practice more. I need to have a better mechanic. I need to have my tires in better condition, and so on and so on. And that applies to motorsport more than I think most other sports. And one of the things is money, because you need, of course, the time as an athlete to be ready, but you need the cash to be able to pay for. So, we're seeing now on screen, this is Macau Grand Prix World Touring Car Championship event in 2008. And my sponsor was City of Dreams. And without them, I wouldn't have been able to race. So I was able to convince their CFO that they needed to do an event for their partners. And a core of that would be me driving a racing car around the streets of Macau. Luckily, he took that idea on.
I mean, yes.
So that's what I now do. So I've stopped driving. I still do the TV, which we'll talk about later. And now my day job, 90% of my time, is talking to brands in the way I used to about, using motorsport as a marketing platform. But I'm no longer saying, and there's this great guy, he's unbelievably talented and charming. He's called Matthew Marsh, and he's racing at Macau. I don't have to do that anymore. I can actually say,
Sounds good.
Yeah, it does, right? And I can actually say, who's your target audience? What are you trying to achieve? And over a period of time, and often it takes a long time, work out how motorsport could help that brand achieve its objectives, and what form of motorsport. Is it Formula One? Is it MotoGP? Is it endurance racing? Is it karting? Whatever it is. And that's what EDJ, my business, does. Is it?
Yes.
We're like a media agency working in the medium of motorsport.
Yeah, that's fantastic. to see where you've been able to go afterwards. But Raymond, I think you have some racing related questions about Matthew. We kind of segued up post racing, but let's turn the clock back a bit.
Yeah, I just want to ask if you did do karting, how did it go for you?
Yeah, I didn't kart before I started racing as a teenager. I started racing when I was 17 and Formula Ford, and I'd never karted before that, which is foolish, really. But then I did later, after I'd moved to Hong Kong. I'm born and raised in the UK, and I started karting in the Philippines. I came over and raced in Carmona.
Yeah.
Carmona?
It's Carmona,
Yeah, it's
yes.
Carmona racetrack. Yeah, that's where I started as well.
Raymond's home track.
Johnny Tan's track, right?
Johnny Tan, yeah.
And Johnny was
And he
brilliant.
still owns it.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how I got connected, but somebody said there's a track. It's not too far from Manila. It's run by a great guy called Johnny Tan. I remember ringing him, I remember faxing him, I think. And he said, yeah, we can organize two karts. My friend Matthew Bale and I went over, and we, over a period of 2 or 3 years, we came over quite frequently and got in, started to understand racing, and it started out as fun. And I do remember, I'm going to be quite slightly unfair here, but it's good fun. I remember that there was two things. I was struggling with competitiveness, right, which is everybody is other than the winners. Mm-hmm. And one day somebody mentioned something about a fuel additive.
Ooh,
fuel additive. So we spoke to the guy running my car, another guy called Matt, I think. There was myself, my best mate Matt Bale, and then I think the mechanic was called Matt, so it did get confusing from time to time. And we said, this fuel additive, oh yeah. Are we using it? No. Is everybody else? Yes. Why are we not using it? It's not legal. Why are they using it? It's one of those things where, if no one's testing it, then it's not, so that was the first thing. And then the next thing, and I think I might have won a race or came close. Anyway, then it rained and I won a race in the rain. And I remember somebody being very complimentary and saying, basically, you only won because you're heavier than everybody else and it gave you more traction. So I remember, you didn't give me any sympathy when I was losing because I was supposed, unless I put on weight before the wet race. You can tell I'm scarred by these memories. No, it was fantastic fun.
Fantastic fun. Oh, Raymond, I think we're starting to dig that hole already into the local scene of karting. Interesting stuff. I can't believe that you started your karting here. Yes, but what is this transition of going as a journalist or a broadcaster? Because again, we just showed, Matthew Marsh is not just a fan, but you have your racing experience too. You're not just some random guy speaking in the camera. You have the credentials to show. So could you tell us about this transition?
Well, the TV started actually before the proper racing career. So I mentioned those 2 years I did Formula Ford in the UK, or a year and a half, that were not very successful at all, other than learning how to rebuild racing cars, which I did quite often from crashing them. So that was successful in that department. But along the way, I'd also, and this is what I'm saying, that, it looks like it's all very well structured and whatever, and it wasn't. I mean, there were moments where I was at Brands Hatch racing circuit in the UK, and the famous commentator, Brian Jones, who was just the voice of Brands Hatch, basically. And I saw him, and I said something like, on the spot, I said, I've always wanted to be a commentator. I don't know where that came from, but I said it. You know how you say that, right? Well, maybe you don't. And he said, well, there are the steps. Come up and join me. So I thought, oh, crikey, now what do I do? So, of course, at some point, he said, come up when it's quiet and we'll have a chat. So I went up when it was quiet. What a nice thing for that gentleman. Sadly, passed away last year, to do. And so I went up, and then there I was, suddenly commentating at Brands Hatch. Now, that was only for a few minutes, and it was him being kind. But then he then said, if you want to do this, what you need to do is come back when we're racing on the Grand Prix circuit, where there are 2 commentary posts. You can be out in the further one. You need to do your homework. You start off by doing one of the the lower races on the card. It's like anything in life. And in a similar way, I'd been doing some writing for Motoring News newspaper, the racing newspaper in the UK, in the same way. Anyway, the point is that you do all these things and they're not connected together. They don't look like you're building a resume. But then I was here in Hong Kong. Star TV started. They had Formula One. They had one person in the studio, Jonathan Green, and he was on his own. So it was fine if everything went smoothly. But if there was a red flag or any form of delay, he was suddenly having to fill. And of course, they had some video packages or whatever. Anyway, whatever the reason was, I decided to call him and offer my services as a complete unknown person with no experience in television. And he correctly was quite suspicious of this and suggested we might meet for a curry first, which we did, and we got on famously. And then the Macau Grand Prix at the end of that year, 1993, there was a storm and the race was delayed. And they were filling. And he said, Matt, come upstairs now onto the rooftop of the Macau Grand Prix control building. And we talked, filled time, and it was dreadful. I was dreadful. He was fine. I was dreadful. I found it was truly dreadful. And no, but really, truly. And somehow the producer said, come and have a chat about doing Formula One next year. So that's when it started in 94.
You gotta start somewhere, like what they all say, of course. And it's very humbling to hear about your beginnings, right, Claudia?
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is. Sorry, and I'll just interrupt myself again, and you, Claudia, but I think the answer is people giving you opportunities, because if Johnny hadn't said, come up, if we'd come for a curry, if he hadn't then said to the producer, can you please have Matt come and join me on the roof, if the producer hadn't said yes, etc., etc., etc. So it's mostly about people saying yes to you.
And if it's not you saying I wanted to be a commentator, that would right?
That would exactly, It starts with asking, right?
So you're currently, of course, you were a commentator and a journalist. And how did driving help you give those details in the commentary box?
That's a really good question, and I think there's two different skills, and sometimes they combine, right? And I'm not talking about myself, but if you think about Martin Brundle, he's got years of success on track and dealing with adversity and whatever. I mean, he was upside down, sliding down the barrier at Monaco in whatever year it was, 84 or something. He's, raced at Le Mans where a tire failure will kill you. He's done all of these things, right?
Yeah, that era, yes.
Lots of success and lots of drama, and worked with teams at incredible length. Anyway, my point is he's also somewhat naturally, I think, but he's sort of journalistically trained by himself. I mean, he's caused that himself, so he can be succinct, so he can think about what he wants to say and deliver it. And that's not always compatible with being a racing driver, but he's got the benefit of those two things. And I've been very lucky, again, with people. So Peter Windsor is a mentor to me. He's a former journalist, well, still is. He's got a brilliant YouTube channel, Peter Windsor. Easy to find, and he does brilliant videos. And he was a team manager at Williams in the 1990s. He was the guy that helped Nigel Mansell become successful, and so on and so on. And,
oh my gosh, sorry, the golden age. Yeah, you were saying
Nigel Mansell. Oh my gosh,
exactly.
I remember him. I loved him.
Exactly. I mean, also he tells brilliant stories about Nigel. So what's not to like? And
right.
And I'm going to get onto. So I'll talk about Peter because I think people who are watching the show might think, I need to, if I don't already, and many of them will, because he's got 100 and something thousand followers already and these brilliant videos. But there I was on the King's Road in London in a coffee shop, and Peter walked in, and I said, "Hello," because I recognised his face, and we started chatting, and then we ended up going out for dinner and became best mates. He was the best man at my wedding, and I was almost said more importantly than that. And that would have been problematic. I didn't mean that. What I mean is that in terms of this show and the topic of motorsport, what was brilliant was that Peter taught me two things. Well, taught me one thing, which was critical, which was to look for good examples. And so one of the things that he would often say was, what would Michael do? So we talked about Nigel, and that's great, Nigel Mansell. But what would Michael Schumacher do? And if ever there was a situation, what would Michael do, right? And that's a really good template, I think, for success. Because if you think, what would a guy like Michael Schumacher do? Well, he would make sure, for example, he was, fitter. We know this. He was fitter. He had the best team. He had the most money around him. He had all the advantages where he could, including being the best in the race car, because he taught himself to do that. And Peter taught me that, and taught me also a lot about how to. I was about to say express myself succinctly, having proven I don't do that just now.
Claudia? Yeah.
No, okay. So let's say, Matthew, you're experienced. You said you're a race car driver, a journalist, and also a commentator. If I was someone that was new into Formula One, right? How would you like make me fall in love with Formula One or race car driving using your commentary expertise? What are you gonna let me look at while the car is racing, and or what will I listen to? So I'll get stuck into the game, to the race.
Well, okay, that's a really nice question again. You're good at questions, Claudia. I'm going to think of one to ask you on the spot.
Sorry.
Let's look at that through the lens, I think, of Drive to Survive, shall we?
That's right.
Because
Yes, that's crazy. Yeah.
transformed Formula One in many ways, right? And I think what Drive to Survive gets criticised by people, and that's okay because it's successful. So successful things, they attract criticism. I think one of the reasons Drive to Survive is as good as it is that the man that led it to happen, this guy called Sean Bratches, who was brought in. So when Liberty took over Formula One, Chase Carey came in to run the sport as CEO. By the way, he's the most underrated person in Formula One in the last decade, in my opinion. The things he's done, no one ever talks about it because they're kind of in the background, but he completely restructured the sport, including commercially. Now, one of the things that he hired Sean, who had already retired. He got Sean out of retirement. Sean was the commercial head of ESPN beforehand. So he's an entertainment person, sports TV person, knows what he's doing. He came into Formula One with really a fresh set of eyes, had no experience of Formula One at all. I think that was an advantage because he was then struck by the things, Claudia, to your point, that were attractive about Formula One, that are attractive about Formula One. And I think he thought immediately, if I can put that in front of a general audience, I'm going to suck up a lot of those people into our sport. And that's what we've seen happen. I think, if I'm not mistaken, after the first series of Drive to Survive, the skew male-female went from 70-30 to much nearer 60-40. And the age skew went from 35 and up. It went down from 35 nearer to 25, right? So, which for marketeers is the sweet spot, of course. An older, more male demographic maybe has higher spending power. That's the old Bernie model. Remember Bernie said, about buying Rolexes. That's great, that's fine. And there's a lot to be said for that still. Let's not get it wrong. But of course, people that are 25 are going to become 35 in approximately 10 years' time. So it's quite a good idea to get them on board. If you're widening if you're growing your audience, that's what Drive to Survive has done. How's it done that? I love this picture, Jackie Stewart. What a legend.
Yes. I'll keep it there much longer. Don't worry.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I've got some good out there for Jackie in a minute. So what did he do? What do they do with Drive to Survive? Well, what they show is that there are 20 drivers who are almost all very attractive. And I don't necessarily mean physically or by being handsome. Most of them are actually. And they're physically attractive because they're fit. But they're attractive also because they're driven and focused and motivated and all those positive things. And a lot of them are quite humorous, and they're mostly very intelligent. And so I think that's a key aspect. And then you've got the complexity of the sport, which can sometimes can put people off. But the way it's presented in Drive to Survive as a challenge that people are coming together to overcome, whether it's the challenge of having enough money or the challenge of working out how to get your tires into exactly the right temperature window, whatever it is. So the point is that Drive to Survive brilliantly, I think, distilled all that into something that is, visually and orally attractive. And I think, Claudia, that's the answer to your question. Really.
When Carey came into F1, I was starting to see so many changes. I'm like, wow, it's so much easier for new fans to learn, because I was watching in like the 2000s in the Schumacher era, and I just ended up studying myself. And then with all of these, it was fantastic. You had fixed car numbers. They were much bigger, similar to that of NASCAR. They were explaining the tire compound, so you didn't have to do your own reading. So I think we're here today. And some people go, oh, I'm into F1 now, because only a handful of people in school would go, oh, yeah, Michael Schumacher's the guy, and this and that.
Well, and I'm going to credit Chase with that. This is me guessing, but I can imagine Chase Carey would sit in a meeting and he would say to the Formula One people, why are the numbers not bigger on the cars? I'm just making this up as an example. And they would say, oh, because and something. And he would just eyes would glaze over. He'd say the numbers need to be bigger because the fans can't recognize it.
I think you have a point, Matthew. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I was cutting off
Well,
right there.
or things like tire warmers. He might, and there's been a challenge to get rid of the tire warmers for years and years and years, right? Like IndyCar doesn't have tire warmers, right? They seem to be fine without the tire warmers, right? Okay, so it's challenging. Old diddums, the 20 best drivers in the world, I think they can deal with it. Now the point is massive saving in money potentially. I can imagine in meetings where it's Chase, they might say to him, "Oh, but the trouble is you don't realise the tyres," and I'm sure there are technical reasons, but he would have the ability. He'd have the advantage of not knowing and understanding it, and therefore not caring about it and thinking about the bigger picture. I suspect that for Stefano Domenicali, as brilliant as he no doubt is, he's got a different kind of challenge, which is when they start trying to sell him on a concept. Stefano, we do need to have, whatever it is, like we used to have these brake ducts and wing bits and everything, all this detail, which is kind of fascinating if you're that, but it's not, is it? No one cares. And he would probably get sucked into the conversation, whereas Chase would just go, "I've got a lunch meeting at 12:30. Can we get through this?"
keeping it simple, bringing in new fans. Yeah. If I can just say real quick, when I watched my first race in 2010, my dad was telling me, rule number 1, buy the souvenir package. That way you can tell the design of the crash helmet, who's driving the Ferrari, who's driving the Red Bull. Is it Vettel? Is it Weber back in those days? So I think you just hit the bullseye right there. And
where was that then? You went to a race?
Oh, yeah. I went to 2010 Sepang and 2010 Singapore.
Oh,
Wow.
fantastic.
So,
Yeah.
life-changing.
I've been to two as
You
well.
went, right,
Both,
Claudia?
both in Melbourne, because I lived in Australia for 10 years. So I got the chance to fly to Melbourne.
That's a great
Melbourne.
event.
Oh
Melbourne.
god, yeah. Who won there? Michael Schumacher. I think Jensen Button crashed in one of the. I forgot already, but that was like 2010.
So
I had another.
I've got a
Go ahead.
question. Sorry, I host a Formula One show, so I'm used to asking questions.
Oh, go ahead.
So
okay.
I've got a
It's
question.
an honor to get a question from Matthew on the
Well,
show.
there you go. So here's the thing. Hands up who watches IndyCar racing.
I would watch Indy, from time to
Sometimes.
time. I can say so.
Okay, Raymond doesn't watch IndyCar racing.
Nah, I just watched Formula One.
Okay, who
Race.
watches Formula 3?
Formula 3, Macau. I'd watch that.
Ah, good.
Formula 3, yeah.
I've
Formula
seen,
3, yeah.
I watched.
Okay.
Oh,
What
Matthew,
about?
may I cut you off real quick? We watch British F4 because there's a Filipino there
Yeah.
Oh,
last
yes.
season. Yeah, Eduardo Coseteng. He guested on our show too. So
Yeah.
he has some interest, I can say. Like, we're like, oh, wow, someone with the Filipino flag, finally. Yeah. Oh,
It's
sorry,
good,
you were
isn't
saying. Yes.
No, because what I was
It's
going to say was,
fantastic.
if you look at Formula 3, Formula 2, IndyCar, NASCAR in particular, you don't know who's going to win the race before the start.
Right.
Yeah.
With Formula 1, it's much more easy to predict who's going to be on the podium, at least. And yet, it's Formula 1 that has 1 billion fans, whatever it is, right? So the question to you is why? What is it about Formula 1 that means it has more fans than the other forms of racing?
I think they got to show that, you're racing in Monaco. It's the playground of the rich. So this is the best of the best. You have the fanciest of the fanciest. My brother popped by when he was off F1 for a while. And like, wow, that's some nice merchandise. And I just popped up the first stuff you could see on the website of Ferrari. So straight away, I think people just see it's the cherry on top in every single aspect. And that's what drives people to it. In my opinion, yes.
Yeah. That's actually a good question. Well, my I watched Nigel Mansell, so I think the marketing at that time was just focused on Formula One. So I just followed Formula One throughout that time, and then I know that I think Formula 3 and 4 they're as exciting as Formula One, but I think the marketing and the way they showcase Formula One is just up there. Right, especially last year's race with Max and Lewis, that ending where there was a controversy and all that. So after that, people started, oh my gosh, you should watch Formula One now because 2022 because there might be other controversies that are going to be showing on the laps, right? So I think it's that they create stories that a lot of people just want to stick to and
Yeah.
listen and to understand what's going to happen?
So I'm sorry, Raymond. I'll let you have a chance in a
Yeah.
minute, but I'm just going to jump in there because what Claudia said, I think, is right. Is that it's a show, and
Mhm.
on our Go F1 show last year, my guest Alex Young, former F1 driver, made a great comment,
Yes.
which was Drive to Survive becomes Dynasty, which was talking about the hoop. It was the team principals arguing on the radio and all the pointing fingers, which is part of, to your point, Claudia, is the show. And that's great. And that's what's made Formula One attractive. And the good news for fans, I think, is that many of those who've been attracted recently by the show and it being more readily available and understandable have if they want to, a long road to walk on, because it's a very complicated endeavor, Formula One racing, and there's a lot to see. And so, the racing drivers, the racing people, when you watch now, you say, way that guy turns into the corner, the way he's protecting the tires, the way all of these the pit stop times. That's what I enjoy, but that's no more or less important than somebody enjoying the drama between Christian Horner and Toto Wolff. They're both equally valuable. Mm-hmm. And the point is that sport has all these different components, and many people, as we talked about, are being attracted by the drama of these great actors and actresses on the stage of Formula One. And then as they get more and more invested in the sport and familiar with it, they're going to start to learn all these other things that we find, probably because we're more familiar with it, fascinating. I think that's really good news for Formula One. It's a long way to go.
Raymond, I think you wanted the question, or you can answer your answer first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to agree with Matthew that Formula One at the end of the day is purely entertainment for us Formula One fans. And I think not all people know that racing is highly dramatic, and especially what happened last season. I think it really gives a whole story about what Formula One is.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's also, I keep coming back to this point about it being very attractive. I think it's visually, I'll come at it from a different angle. When I went to Le Mans in 1987 as a spectator and stood in the grandstand and watched the cars go by as the sun set and glowing brake discs and flames coming out of the turbochargers. And I was listening to Dire Straits. And it was just, I can see it now. And it puts, the hairs in the back of my neck, coming, whatever it is, 40 years on. Because it's, like I said, visually just really attractive. And motorsport goes really well to music. I mean, sport goes well to music. I think motorsport, particularly racing cars, decelerating, accelerating flames. I think there's so much about it that's attractive. And that's before we even talk about Carlos Sainz, which is a topic for another day.
Smooth operator, eh? Yes. But okay.
I said to Carlos once.
Yes.
I said to him. I said to him before an interview. I said, somebody was saying to me, God, Carlos Sainz, wow, looks so good in red. And he said, who was that? And I said, it's a friend. He said, you going to tell me who it was? And I said, no. It's quite news. I thought you must get compliments like that every day, but he still pretended it was new and fresh.
So we have some photos here with the different personalities. Unfortunately, no photo with Sainz, but what's it like being in the midst of the hustle and the bustle of an F1 weekend? Not everyone gets to say they're literally in the paddock interviewing these personalities, you could say, or the athletes or managers, whatever you want to call them.
It's fantastic, and it's something. I suppose I had the advantage of having been around the sport for quite a long time as a competitor, and then being at Grand Prix in the support races or being a journalist before I started to do what you're seeing here. Interviewing people on the grid and in the post-race, what do they call it, the media scrum, or the media.
The pen, yes.
Yeah. Scrum is not the official word, but it's much better. much
better. We can talk about rugby.
But it's a much better description because it is it is tight. And that's actually kind of the point, really. So when I had never wanted to do that because I wanted to be, I didn't want to be doing the thing of asking the same question to the drivers again and again. That's the thing that I didn't want to be doing. And I much preferred to be the pundit on the show, going around and talking to people in the know and watching things and observing, and then trying to distill that into a sort of smart ass comment right at the end of the race, or when I was being asked by Paula. You got here's Paula obviously, and Jasmine and Alex there, and that was kind of the role I thought I liked this, where get lots of information, think it through. Again, going back to what would Michael do? That was, I'd learned that from Peter. It was like there's always somebody who knows better than me here, so I would go around the paddock and find Mark Hughes, the brilliant journalist, and say to Mark, I'm confused about this topic. Can I just go through it with you? And find a technical person, go find a tire guy to talk about tires. And so then you can. I would give the impression of knowing what I was talking about, but basically I'd found somebody else who knew what they were talking about, and then I was, sharing that with the viewers. Okay, that's my job, was being the conduit, right, and maybe trying to add a little bit of humor or a strong opinion to go with it. But then, and I know this is not the question you asked, but you're sparking some interesting thoughts in my mind. So if you'll let me ramble a little bit, I'll try and be amusing. But then when in 2018, Fox said, do you want to go on the road and do basically all the races bar a few, and do the punditry and be the presenter from the racetrack? And it means going and doing all of those interviews in the media pen in the scrum. I thought about it. I thought, of course I would. Yes, but so how do I manage this? And again, I rang a few people. Steve Dawson, who was one of the presenters at Fox, I rang him.
Oh yes, watched him.
Yeah, he was great, and he was like, just remember every day that you have to justify that you're there. He doesn't mean justify to your employers, but when you're speaking to the audience, give some benefit from the fact you're there. You hold up something and talk about, it's cold. Look, I'm covered in rain, or whatever it is. Showing people what it feels like to be there. So you're helping them understand and get a feeling for the event. The other thing was these media scrums. It's a lot of people packed into a small space. The driver comes and stands in a particular place. You can see it here. Basically, only one camera is going to get a clear view. And if two people are standing side by side and they're two cameramen, their cameras become increasingly at an angle, like this angle here from this camera, which is probably my producer Raushan took it. He's taking it on a camera, on a photograph, right? So it's fine that it's the side of Lewis's face, but that wouldn't work for an interview. So typically, you're trying to get your camera in the middle.
Yeah.
And basically, I think this is a job for collaboration rather than competition, which is what happens. Of course, everybody's fighting to get the best angles. So I went to Will Buxton, who we all know now, super famous. At the time, he was less famous. And I said, Will, I've got an idea, which is, can I stand next to you? So you've got the main shot. You're doing it for Formula One. We'll get our cameraman as close to your camera as possible. We don't have an ego. I don't have an ego. Fox doesn't have an ego. I don't need to have my name, voice, anything. Happy to take your questions. And I'll just let you ask questions, and I'll put my microphone next to yours, and the driver only has to answer once. So it's happy days, everybody. He's like, yeah, mate, of course, happy days. And I said, then if I think of something different, the sort of thing that I can ask as a former driver or smart-ass question, I'll do that. But otherwise, we'll let them go. And because Will got the point and helped me do that, it took out all the stress of me having to try and fight with my camera and get into a good position and fight the others, whatever. I had a buddy, and I was next to him. The drivers worked out fairly quickly. I wasn't going to be asking questions unless necessary, so we were making their lives easier. And the whole system worked really well. And once we got that going, it was an absolute joy, because not only did I get the chance to interview the drivers, but I got a chance to chat with Will about stuff. And he's really fascinating. I mean, he's a massive Beatles fan, right? For example. And like a proper Beatles fan. He's a proper music fan. And just so we talk about the Beatles, talk about all sorts of things. And then, here they come. And he's also a brilliant interviewer. And I learned a lot from him standing next to him. I'm not sure if that was the answer to the question you asked. I can't remember what the question was. But I enjoyed
But we're just learning. It's just
We're
like
just
Master
learning
and
from you.
Sensei. We're like,
We love it. Yeah.
this is
Keep talking, it's
fantastic.
okay.
Yeah. We're learning, of course. And Will
We're
Buxton,
learning.
as we know, is a fantastic presenter. He does the post-race shows also like you. He has his own channel also in doing it. Being able to interview the guys of like Jack Aitken, who's also in your show. Also worked alongside the guys like Pietro Fittipaldi. But first and foremost, Matt, I hope you don't mind if we just take a quick pit stop as we have some messages from our partner. So we want to remind you, remember the Globally Ballin Network. So again, do head to globallyballin.com for your original content and do give them a follow on social media. If you're on Spotify, thanks for tuning in. Just make sure to click the link for more information. Follow us on social media, our page itself at WTHAW Podcast. If it has to do with sports, we cover it on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe on YouTube. That's where you can catch our episodes outside of Facebook, along with our sister shows. And again, sister shows too are available on Spotify. Listen anytime, anywhere. And for their shows, they got Eliza Valdez chatting with Denise Dinsay, a volleyball personality, of course. And of course, it's hang time, and that's the place to go with Denise Dinsay. And then we got Mac Dionisio as the guest in our new show, Mukbang with Jojo. Great volleyball conversations again with Joan Mariganot, being a player herself. So she's been able to drop so much from her fantastic guests and their great mukbang, of course. And for our many sponsors, we got Chops to Go, New Era, Hinuluban Farms, Barrio Fiesta, Fujimama for your Asian food, Georgie's Delights for your great peanut butter cookie chum. And you got the Daily Ounce giving our aqua flasks as we have right here. Too big to carry for a pit stop, though. New Era Chops to Go. Thanks for sorting us out too. Our caps, our fantastic chips from their branches in SM South Mall, SM Bikutan, SM North EDSA. Last but not least, Cuts Apparel. Thank you very much for outfitting the show. So do check them out for your company uniforms, your biking polos, and you name it, they got it at Cuts Apparel PH. So that was a pit stop for you guys. I didn't get one. It's okay. I'll do no
How many
stop
seconds
strategy.
did you? How many seconds was that? Did you
Definitely,
count it?
definitely longer than all the F1 pit stops combined last season.
Oh
That's
my
for
God.
sure. Okay, but
Yeah, okay, fine.
no black flag for me. But guys, anything else you got for Matthew before we head on to our preview, of course, of the upcoming
Yeah.
F1 season? We're all itching. Raymond, go ahead.
Yeah, if we can go back a little bit, Matthew, is it okay?
Sure.
I just want to ask, what was it like? Because I know a number of drivers who ended their Formula One dream. I know you went to racing as well. And what was it? What was it like? What was in your head when you had to really stop racing? When, I don't know if you would agree that there's only up to a certain age that drivers can only race for them to reach Formula One. And how did you take that?
So I think there's a couple of things that you've opened up there. One is that Formula One, as you say, there's really only one route to Formula One, right? And it starts very young, and it involves a lot of money, it involves a lot of money, basically. Somehow it involves lots of money. So I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago, a young man who's still at school and wants to become a racing driver. Well, he wants to become a Formula One driver. And I listened to him, and I said to him, what I just said is that it might be physically possible for you to become a Formula One driver, but I think you should assume that's not you. But you could be a racing driver, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with being a racing driver. And I'm saying that because, like we said earlier on in the show, Formula One is the kind of be all and end all of motorsport from the perspective of most fans. If you say Formula One, most people on the street think motor racing, right?
Yeah.
They don't distinguish, and that's fine. But my point is, I didn't ever race Formula One. I did race a Formula One car, but not in a Formula One Grand Prix. And that's obviously I would have preferred to be a Grand Prix driver in many ways. But I had a brilliant time being a racing driver, and there are many racing drivers who earn a living without ever driving in Formula One. Actually, again, it's almost like there are people that earn a living driving racing cars. Assume that's not you. To everybody. But that's okay, because it's the minority people that go motor racing. Most people find money in some way. Either they earn it or they find sponsors and they go motor racing, and they have a brilliant time doing it. It's a fantastic endeavor. And some people don't drive the cars, but they work in the teams. So it's a brilliant sport. So the reason I'm saying that is that I think it's because Formula One has become, when I was growing up in the 80s, there was Formula One, there was Le Mans, there was touring cars, and it was much more even. And now it's Formula One, and there's all this other stuff that no one else has ever heard, basically. And maybe now, therefore, for young people, and Raymond, you've put the light on this, which is good, the focus on this, which is maybe most people think, well, if it's not Formula One, it's not worth doing. I know that's not how you feel, but so I think it's important to say this, that there's some fantastic, actually, probably most of the other motor racing in many ways is better, and you can enjoy a lot. So that goes on to the next point, which is, yes, if you want to be a Formula One driver and you're 5 years of age, it's probably too late already. I'm being a little bit facetious.
I think they start karting 7 normally.
5 years old.
Yeah, if you're 15, forget about it. You're not going to be, and you haven't started karting, you're not already winning championships, forget it.
Oh, wow.
But that doesn't mean that you can't go on and have a very successful career driving in sports cars. You could be, and you could win Le Mans 24 hours. Because you can. And to your point, part of the problem is perception, because people are going to say, "Oh, this guy just won in Formula 2. Yeah, but he's 22." I mean, really? But so, yeah, I think that's the answer to the question. Is two things. One is, yes, certainly, if you're not starting in single-digit years in karts and you've got a lot of money to do it, you're not going to make it to Formula One, but that doesn't mean you can't have a great time. The second thing is, you can go on being a racing driver until you're in your 70s. Paul Newman, the famous actor you probably know, raced. He raced in the Daytona 24 Hours, and every year he would carry on his car his age. And I think the last number he carried was 82. I'll double check what we're talking. I think Paul Newman was 80-something in his last motor race. And he started motor racing. I shouldn't be doing this while I'm live. Paul Newman. Anyway, Paul Newman. I think he started racing older than I am now. I think he was 56 from memory. I can't find it. I think people can look it up. I want to say Paul Newman was 56 when he took up motor racing because his wife bought him a driving school thing.
It is the wife. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, exactly. And he went on and race to race. Here you go. Yeah, 81.
Oh, not a bad guess earlier or a recall. Quite
exactly.
Close.
And as I say, I from memory, he was 56 when he started.
Oh my gosh.
So everybody who's listening, you probably got time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, you're 81, in which case your career's probably.
Year Raymond, anything else? I got something. We carry on with this thing.
Go ahead.
It's never too late to race, right? I think there's this thing on Netflix, even before Drive to Survive, called Gentleman Driver, I think. So they would be racing an endurance race, and they just take turns, and they were businessmen. So when they weren't in the car, they were making all their calls. So it wasn't exactly all Formula One, but like you said, they were getting into the different series. Yes. But Matthew, we're loving this classroom session. We can just go all day. I honestly do not mind. The two don't mind here, but I hope we can carry on to the upcoming 2022 driver lineup and what's been going on as of late. They had testing in Barcelona. They had testing in Bahrain too. Both great circuits for different reasons. But what do you think about what's been going on so far? I guess we can start with the Haas. Kevin Magnussen came in late. We got an asterisk for drivers who are in new teams or teams finding new drivers with them. Yeah,
it's nice. And I think I've mentioned already, and you can see it. I sneakily put it into my name on this show. Go F1 is our live post-race show. So those of you that used to watch on Fox Sports, thank you for that. And of course, it went away the beginning of October last year. So we created a new show. It's called Go F1, and it streams on Twitter. This year, streams on Twitter, YouTube, and others to be announced. It's going to be very widely available. But you can find Go F1 Show on Twitter or my handle, Matthew Marsh HK, and that's going to shift to Matthew Marsh F1. But anyway, you'll find me and find us, because we've got these live shows, 30 to 45 minutes in duration. Myself, Alex Jung is our regular guest. We have typically another person, the third person we've had here. We've got Stefan Johansson, the former Ferrari and McLaren driver. We had Danny Sullivan, the former Indy 500 winner. We had Jack Aitken, who's current Williams Formula One driver. James Allen, who was the commentator in Formula One for many years. We've been very fortunate. We've got some very exciting guests. We've got Craig Scarborough coming on for this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix. Craig, of course, is a brilliant technical analyst, works in Formula One, sketches out what's going on, and he'll be able to help us break down not only the Grand Prix, but what's happening with the cars. So that's the plug for the show. Please tune in on it's Monday morning, but it's always available on replay. So you can also, unlike in the old days of television, you can watch our show whenever you like. So that's thank you. That's a message from our sponsor.
Of course. Making this episode possible, of course, you sharing all the knowledge you got. Yes, we got Jack Aiken right here, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
one of our guests.
Great guy, and really good to have him on our show last year. And you were talking about the field in Formula One this year. You got some.
Yes.
We've got one rookie, haven't we? And that's Zhou Guanyu. Zhou is from Shanghai, very competent racing driver, and because he came into Formula One with significant financial backing, people have put a question mark next to his name. You haven't, because you're much more polite, and I agree with you, because the asterisk is correct as he's new, but there's no doubt, and having watched him in the pre-season testing, it just confirmed what I felt. Very competent racing driver. He knows what he can do, drives to that level. There are moments in Formula 2 when I was, wow, he's very brave, but never in a kind of locked up, reckless way. He's just very good racing driver. I think he's better than people think he is, because he didn't win the Formula 2 championship, because he's got lots of funding. You know how that colours people's judgment. It's the same thing with Lance Stroll, that you see on the page. Lance Stroll is a very competent racing driver. You don't get on the pole anyway. You don't win the Formula 3 championship without being extremely... And competent sounds like I'm being pejorative. I'm not. I'm just trying to make the point that, you've got 20 guys in Formula 1. How, if we say they're all brilliant, well, they are all brilliant, right, compared to us, but not compared to Lewis, Max, Lando, and others. So, what else can I say to you? Kevin Magnussen, yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, Kevin.
Sorry, he makes us laugh for a lot of reasons.
Why? Yes. Tell me about that.
Oh, well, about Kevin Magnussen?
Yeah.
Oh, I think simply with Drive to Survive, him smashing a door, Gunther saying he does not Fox smash my door. So when Kevin Magnussen came in, Haas F1 released a meme making fun of that. I'm like, okay, the F1 season's here. But if you want to look at it in the proper perspective, I guess we can say Mick Schumacher has a barometer now, because he was the barometer last time racing against Mazepin. So we're going to see how far this Haas car can go. And
so answer me this, my panel. Answer me this. Why is it? Kevin's great. Don't get me wrong. It's not about Kevin. Why have we got a driver who finished his F1 career a year ago? Why is that guy coming back into Formula One now? There is a single reason why, I believe, and I want to know whether you have what do you think? Why are we having guys having to come back in?
Wow, this is cool. We get to answer your questions. Well, I can.
It's a test.
We're being tested.
Yeah, I'll be the sacrificial lamb. I think.
Yeah, go.
What I think with Kevin Magnussen is that they had two rookies last time, so they're not exactly the most ideal barometer. So getting a guy who knows the team and the team knows him, they're not going to have to play so much of that guessing game. And to add to the fact that he's been around for a long time, so he's going to be giving them that feedback because he already knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
of course, Mick knows too. Yeah.
But why is it? I'll answer the question. Formula One has no testing anymore. So there is no way for a driver to be anything other than a rookie when he gets in the car. When Lewis Hamilton came into Formula One in 2007, I haven't got this exactly right, but he was on the podium for almost all the races at the beginning of the season. He won his fifth or seventh race. He almost won the World Championship that year. And he'd done, I think, 5,000 kilometers or 7,000 kilometers of testing the previous year. So he wasn't a rookie. He was a rookie legally, but he wasn't a rookie. Damon Hill only got his chance to be a Formula One driver with Williams because he was a test driver for Williams. And increasingly, the engineers were saying to Frank Williams and Patrick Head, this guy's really fast. He's really competent. He's giving us great feedback. He's costing us nothing compared to these really highly paid drivers. He's really good. Give him a chance. And when the chance came, Damon stepped in the car and delivered. Now, if there hadn't been testing, that never would have happened. So what we've locked ourselves into, and I know it's about cost cap and all that cost saving. I kind of understand it, but it's why we get drivers hanging around forever because there's no guys. We don't have a situation where the test team manager's saying, but he's half a second slower than our test driver. Oscar Piastri should be in Formula One this year, and there wasn't a seat for him. But if he'd been doing 3 months of testing over the winter, when Mazepin got fired by Haas, they would have said, we've got to have Piastri because he's been setting times quarter of a second faster than everybody else or something, or 10, he's been consistently fast. But there's no barometer. There's no reference point. Everybody, like you said, if they took Piastri into Haas, he's got to learn everything about Formula One. They want to do that. Whereas, anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing us to get that chance. Yeah. I don't know if you want to test Raymond or Claudio on any of the drivers on the screen before we get to the other half of the field.
Okay, prediction on Alex Albon. How good is he going to be? How good do we think Alex Albon's going to be?
Raymond, you're up.
Yeah, Raymond, you're up.
Yeah, your turn.
Yeah,
I can blabber too, but I want to go ahead, man.
yeah. I think Alex Albon has a good experience through Red Bull, and he's done good progress throughout his career. I think he'll be batting good in the midfield. I think he'll over-deliver.
Yeah. So we've got a reference point in Nicholas Latifi, haven't we? So we know that Nicholas was whatever it was. I don't have it in front of me, but a couple of tenths slower than George. Got pretty close towards the end of the time. Wasn't embarrassing in any. Again, very competent, very good racing driver. So it'll be interesting to see how well Alex does. I think Alex is really good, and his trajectory was very badly managed by Red Bull. No surprise there, really.
Tough
so
program.
I'm hoping that, I'm hoping, just silly, wasn't it? So I'm hoping that he's got a chance to reset now, and I think he'll deliver really strongly. I'm hoping. I'm confident.
So I guess we have Aston Martin left on this chopping board before we reach the midfield or the upper half.
Yeah,
What
it'd
do
be
you
interesting
think?
to see. I think we know that Seb can have days when he's not there, and other days, if you know what I mean, where it's like,
Yes.
days it doesn't really come together. But I think he's also shows every now and again he's still got serious pace, and I think it depends on the car, really. I think if the car gives him confidence and he's enjoying it and he feels it's worthwhile, and that he's happy within the team environment, which is quite a lot of ifs there. But if those ifs are good, I think I'll come at it from a different angle. To me, the big question mark is what's Aston Martin, Cognizant, Aramco, Formula One team, whatever the name is. You can't fit it on a screen.
Long name.
What's that going to look like in the post-Otmar Zafnauer era? Because he's been the head of that team for a long time. He's a very seriously intelligent man and, operator, optimizer. And his movement out of the team has got to have significant effect. Now, they've got a really good person replacing him. It's a very well-funded team. I'm just interested to see how it is without Otmar there.
If I could chime in, Matthew, and you can correct me, of course, if I'm wrong. They were saying that Seb loved the car with understeer. That's why he was so successful with Red Bull in his championship days. So if they can find a way to give him that kind of car in this current regulations, I think he can be much more competitive, we could say.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's a bit like a kind of people get these, Lewis likes this and Seb likes that and whatever. I think Raymond would agree, basically, on track, is that no one wants understeer. And what it basically means probably is that he'd prefer a car and it's not about prefer, it's about comparing two different drivers. Like we can probably say, by observing it, that Max Verstappen is more comfortable, relatively speaking, with a car that is, I won't say less stable, that's going to rotate more quickly into a corner, right? But it's tiny, tiny amounts. And then it's a bit, somebody will say it and it sounds good. And then everybody says it and it becomes like the fact. And then I'm sure some would think, understeer, give me a break. Understeer is the worst thing for a racing driver because it means you're waiting. No, I don't want to.
Ooh, I love how it was debunked too, and now we know more. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Well, we're learning, of course, because who the heck are we, right? This is why thank you again. But we have the rest of the field here, pretty much the upper half. We got the World Championship contenders, Alpha Tauri continuing to make progress. What do you think about Pierre? He's sometimes we read about him saying that he thinks he should go to Red Bull and this and that. When Yuki had a tough year last season.
Hmm. So we had on Go F1 last year, we had one of our radio shows. We had Trevor Carlin, who runs, of course, the Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4, sort of the mega team of the feeder series. And he knows Yuki well because Yuki drove with him in Formula 2. And he said, when asked about Pierre, he said, I don't know Pierre. I've never had Pierre drive one of my cars, but I think he has to be mega because I know how good Yuki is. And Pierre's kicking Yuki's butt.
Yeah.
So that was really quite a nice, it was a kind of backhanded compliment, really, wasn't it? It's like Yuki's mega, so Pierre must be mega. I think Yuki suffered from being, it's a two-edged sword. He's in the Red Bull system, so he gets into Formula One. He gets into Formula One a year too early, or whatever it is, right? Super pressure. It's very hard work, and we've gone. The other problem I was moaning about lack of testing. So lack of testing is problem number one. And problem number two is the feeder series are running on Grand Prix weekends with pretty limited running. They don't get much testing either. So you've got drivers coming into Formula One, I think, with less track time than ever in the history of motorsport. And that doesn't seem right to me. So I'm not sure what the question was, but I think Pierre's going to be good. The AlphaTauri, I thought, looked good. I didn't watch the first test, really. I watched the second test a bit. I watched the last day, all of it. Bahrain. I thought I'd let everybody get organised before I sit down and watch it. That's the kind of guy I am. I thought the car looked really good. Visually looks really good. It went round and round and round and round. It looked pretty reliable. I thought it was good, actually, but then the kind of listening to the commentators, they didn't seem to be as impressed by it as I was. But I think we'll wait and see on AlphaTauri. I think it's sort of an unknown, really.
At the end, what matters is what happens after the lights go out.
Exactly. How they operate in the race environment. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about Alpine? They look like the Force India Racing Point. You name it now with the new pink livery, BWT. What do you think about this Alonso Ocon pairing? Normally, Alonso clearly established himself as the alpha, like he always does. But Ocon seems to be buying into things. I guess there's that mentorship or that bromance, we can say.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here, right? The first one is that the advantage of being a manufacturer.
Renault, yes.
And the disadvantage of being a manufacturer. By which I mean, that it's always been somewhat political, the Renault environment. There's been moments when it hasn't been, as in when Fernando was there in 05 and 06, when they had Briatore running it, felt like there was more gap between the race team and the corporation. Alpine is a very important pillar of the Renault Group's automotive activities. The Formula One is a very important part of that. So it's very much embedded in the road car company, which has its advantages. But I think it also means the question mark to me again, and that's why I'm looking beyond the drivers in a way. I was with Aston Martin and Otmar. I think there's some question marks over the new structure. We saw Alain Prost getting moved aside. Yeah, the proof will be in the pudding how it cooks this year. It didn't look particularly effective, the Bahrain. I feel like they're a day or two behind where they want to be. Car looks nice. Great. Great drivers. They've got a problem, which is they're the only team running that engine, of course.
No customers, I think.
Yeah, yes. Which means that they've got, Mercedes has 4 teams, so they have 8 cars driving around collecting data. Ferrari have 3, if I'm not mistaken. And Red Bull 2 and Renault 1, they've got the least amount of data, and that's not going to help. When you're when you're looking for problems to emerge, if you've got Mercedes have 8 cars going out there causing problems in their engines that they can look at and solve, and that's definitely a disadvantage for. Yeah.
If I can ask one more thing about the Renault power units before I think Claudia covers Ferrari, McLaren, do you still see that they're suffering from what went on in the 2010s? Red Bull, Renault getting power unit problems back at that time. The likes of Robert Kubica, that we already saw their engines blowing up or just suffering failures, reliability problems. Did
Well,
that snowball to where it is today? Like,
I
oh,
don't
we
know if
don't
I
want to
can.
get your engines.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that accurately because I don't really know the answer to it. I mean, my observation was that they won the World Championship 4 years in a row as an engine supplier, power unit supplier to Red Bull, and they complained about the fact that no one knew about it. And it's true. Red Bull Racing won 4 championships. Sebastian Vettel won with a Renault engine behind him. Can't be that bad. And I would say the blame is on Renault for not publicising that. You can't blame. They were blaming. They were sort of pointing to the situation. This is why we need to have our own team because we won 4 championships and nobody noticed. I think they could have achieved the objective in a different way without having necessarily to own their own team. I do think that, generally speaking, when you look at corporations, Mercedes is the exception to the rule here. When a massive car company owns a Formula One team, it doesn't work. The exception being Mercedes. And that's the problem they've got, I think, is that they've got a corporate mindset.
Right. Oh,
very
all
interesting.
the time.
And we're starting to see things in a different way now. So can't wait. Claudia, Ferrari.
I hope I'm wrong. And so just to admit, I talk to brands every day about Formula One, and I often recommend Alpine because it's a really effective corporation, some great opportunities, and they look after their brands really well. I know some of the partners they've got, they're very happy. And it goes back to, it's like a bit like, are you too old to be a Formula One driver? It's like, if you want to be in Formula One, there's only one guy who's winning every weekend. So, then you need to choose it on a breadth of reasons, not only winning the Grand Prix.
Right.
So, Claudia, on to you. Ferrari versus McLaren, battle for third last year.
Battle for third last year. And correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, but I think Ferrari and McLaren are the longest traditional rivalries in Formula One. I mean, we got James Hunt, Niki Lauda during the 70s. For me, I'm like Daniel Ricciardo. For me, he's my favorite because he's Australian. What was he lacking last year to bring McLaren up to the ladder?
Nothing. There's nothing wrong with Daniel. I'll say that. Nothing wrong with Daniel. Daniel's a brilliant driver. Lando Norris is as good as Lewis Hamilton. We just don't realise it yet.
Right.
I said this yesterday. We were watching Drive to Survive. I said it. My daughter said, "Well, I knew it when I was 8 because she's a smart ass." But she was right because she did. When he was in Formula 3, it was obvious. Kind of. It wasn't. I mean, it's like a lot of things. It's obvious, and it turns out it wasn't. I mean, but because it's like it looks like it, and it's turned out. I do think that what I said, I believe it. I mean, okay, he's not as good in terms of being fully rounded but he's as good as Lewis was in his fourth year now, I guess, fourth year, whatever. So he is exceptional. I think he's better than George. I think Russell, which is saying something. I think George is amazing. I think he's better than Charles. I think he's really fabulous. And that's the problem Daniel had last year. Was he was up against? It's like being Valtteri or Nico Rosberg or anybody else who had the misfortune of sitting with Lewis Hamilton.
Can we even go Barrichello?
Oh
my gosh!
Oh my goodness!
Exactly right. That's the only thing wrong with Daniel was having Lando as a teammate.
Because Lando's just way above what was that underperforming because probably he's in the wrong team.
Who?
Lando Norris.
Well, I mean, when he came into Formula One, that was the choice, I suppose, where to go, and it was McLaren. I mean, Zach Brown's been sort of managing him from his junior days because Zach's got a very good eye for good racing drivers and thinking ahead business-wise. Some people were surprised that Lando signed a long-term contract with McLaren. I think he took the view that we're going into a new era and that he probably looked at the overall picture and thought, Mercedes, George has got that now. And, am I even going to get in there? How long is Lewis going to stay there for? It could be another 2 years. Who knows? Ferrari, forget it. Again, same thing, locked in. Red Bull, Max is probably going to stay there. Could go number 2 to Max. But whereas McLaren, it's his team, and they want him. and they don't want any, they want Daniel, but they're not looking at, there's no other person around. I think he made that decision, and he thought probably McLaren was going to be closer to the front in the new era of cars because of the way they've restricted how much money you can spend and on what. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm a huge admirer. I'm a fan of his, of course, as well, but I'm also an admirer. I think he's really exceptional.
Yeah. Actually, Daniel Ricciardo mentioned in one of an articles, it says that the rivalry now with Ferrari is a cool story. He said that. I said, okay. I don't know.
And it's going to be
like
great.
2008.
Yeah, it's a cool story.
It is a cool story. So let's just go back a little bit. So I think the McLaren looked great, didn't it, in Barcelona the first 3 days? It looked less good in Bahrain. They had the problem with the brakes, which seems to be a combination of factors. And the car was going faster than, the cars are going faster than I think the teams kind of might have predicted they were by a little bit. They're always on the edge in terms of performance. So McLaren didn't look great in Bahrain, but I think they'll come back pretty fast. Ferrari looked really strong.
Yep.
And the car also looks fantastic. They've done a great job. Ferrari's a team that's been coming back, right? And they just continue.
Yeah, they're coming back.
They've kept the same old story, about the Mattia Binotto, very calm, seems to have been given the confidence to just take time, not take your time, but take the time necessary to rebuild the team. You hear people talk about the culture there now. People are less fearful of losing their jobs over bad performance in the moment, and it's much more about just keep doing things the right way. I think Ferrari probably number 3 this year.
Yeah. So does that?
So that's the battle of
that's
third.
it, I guess. Yes,
Yeah.
for battle of third. Yeah. So let's get on to the grand finale, Raymond. The top 2 teams.
The story.
Yeah, here we go about Mercedes. Do you think Mercedes has something cooking for next week's race?
Yes, probably. You can never discount them, can you?
Yeah.
It didn't look like they were sandbagging, by which I mean, the car didn't look. It's hard to say. Like I said, I thought the AlphaTauri looked good, and then it wasn't that fast. But so I'll answer your question, then I'll add a comment. So the answer to your question is, as you know, right? We get to the racetrack on Friday, whatever, Saturday, free practice 3. We start to get an idea. Qualifying, that's when you really learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if there isn't a Mercedes on the front row, but it doesn't look like it's as good as the Red Bull, and the Ferrari looks strong. That's great news for us as fans. Is there's 6 cars looking, Ferrari could Ferrari suddenly are on the pole in Bahrain and be like, okay, yeah, it's not a total surprise, right? Yeah. So that's great news for us as fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing, and I think I've probably been talking for long enough, but the one more
No
thing.
worries.
The one thing I'm slightly uncomfortable with at the moment is that the cars are very light on the front, if you know what I mean. They've got because of the way the aerodynamics work, is you notice in testing, if they lock up the front axle, it's very difficult to get it unlocked again. And so there's a good and a bad about that. And it's a little bit like sometimes racing in the rain. You see a guy lock up and he can't get it unlocked and he loses 2 seconds. So the good news maybe is it's going to punish mistakes. And that I've always liked H-pattern gearboxes because people are more likely to make a mistake under braking, and therefore you can put someone under pressure and they make a mistake and you overtake them. There's a bit of that. It looks a little bit cumbersome. And I think that at Bahrain, a little bit of lock up and you run wide and go over the curb and you're onto the dust and that's fine. In other circuits, going to be from run wide is running into the wall. So I think some races it's like Saudi with the barrier so close, Azerbaijan, Monaco. This is relevant to me because with the Go F1 show, we have to choose a time to go live. And I'm always thinking, oh God, what time is the race going to finish? And for those cars might be smashing themselves up against the wall. It's going to become more complicated. I think the cars are more difficult to drive than last year.
I think there's complaints about the weight and this and that. They wanted to raise the minimum, if I'm not mistaken. Claudia?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go off topic from this driver's lineup, Matthew, if I may. I was going to Carmona. Of course, I know that you know Carmona. And
He
stopped
did.
at a
Yeah. Matthew
I
learned
stopped at a
karting there.
Yeah.
Matthew learned how to kart there.
yeah. I stopped at a petrol station and I put air into my tires, right? And my rear tire was 18 psi. I'm like, oh my gosh, it should be like 30, right? I'm like, and then started thinking, this is a question I'll ask Matthew later. How important is this is so technical? Yeah, really, the psi in a tire. Because when Raymond, Clara, and myself, when we go analyze Formula One, we think that we're really good,
Analyze.
and
Who
we're
the heck are we?
analyzing, yeah.
Right?
But the questions whether how important the psi in the tire, how important is it actually?
Critical.
Even like, yeah,
Critical. I want to say that the tires are. I don't know. I think it is. I think I'll come at it from a different angle. I think last year what we saw between Mercedes and Red Bull was they would arrive at the circuit and we were thinking, get on, go F1. I'd always ask Alex, who's going to be strong next week? And he'd say, well, based on history and this, that, and the circuit layout, probably Mercedes or probably Red Bull. And then what we would actually see is that one of them would get it just right in terms of getting the tires working. There's a window of the temperatures when they work correctly, and then if you overheat the tires, it starts to lose performance. All of that stuff is very difficult to understand and very difficult to manage as a driver and as a team. And so, to your point, if you're running your tires at almost half what they should be, that's not good.
Yeah.
So that's not a good
yeah.
thing.
No, I was like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I have to have that checked tomorrow.
Yeah. So the teams are always wanting to optimize, and as you probably know, there are rules in Formula One on how low you can go on. In fact, not how low. It's like that they keep the tires artificially high on pressure to protect them, because if the tire pressure is low, the tire flexes and it can end up breaking the structure of the tire and causing it to explode. So they keep the teams are forced to keep the pressures high. So it's absolutely critical. On the road, it's important because the same sort of thing. The car's going to perform. You can imagine, by the way, if your tire pressures are different on all four wheels, that if you have to suddenly brake in an emergency, your car is unbalanced before you even start. So
and you could feel it. I was feeling it. It's like, okay, I have to check my tires. 18, and the rest were like 30. I'm like, oh gosh. So I have to have that.
Low.
I have to have that tire checked tomorrow.
So, you do.
I think there was a season where they had to reinforce like that floor for tire pressures because they were having an issue at a certain circuit. But we have a question for you specifically, Matthew.
Oh.
Who will win this year's Drivers' Championship? Not about constructors. Very straight to the point.
Well, I don't know. Is that a good answer?
Oh.
Who would you put your money on? Oh, if I can share real quick, when I visited the ESPN Star when I watched Singapore in 2010, so Gary Anderson was there, Steve Slater was sick, and I asked him, who do you think's going to win the race tomorrow? And he just said, I'll put my money on Alonso. And he did, and Alonso won. So maybe who would you put your money on if you had that chance?
I don't actually have any idea, which I like, because in previous seasons you said, well, should be Lewis, should be based on what we know, right? But based on what we've seen so far, I really don't know. Pick one of Lewis, Max. Lewis or Max, really, right? Maybe a Ferrari driver. But
I'd go with Sainz. That's just me, though, being with Ferrari.
Yeah. And I would say constructors, I would say Mercedes. Because if we assume Mercedes is going to be competitive, they've got two guys who are, those two are better than the two at Red Bull, in totality. You know what I mean? And especially in terms of point scoring, I think. So that's slightly unfair. No, it's not unfair. Anyway, slightly unkind.
Yes. John Marfal went straight and just gave his opinion. I think he's siding with Renault or Alpine for winning constructors. So he must be riding with them and Alonso. Yes.
Well, he must
but given... Oh, yes, sorry. You were saying.
Something. Anyway, it's nice.
Yes. We had a crazy shakeup of regulations. 2009, the pecking order was really changed up. 2014, they shook it up I think not as crazy as 2009, and we're having another set of rule changes. So do you think things will be as crazy as how it was back then? Like, oh no, this team wasn't so good last year, and here they are now taking advantage. Do you see that happening this year?
No, not really. Um, I think we've already seen in the testing that the established order remains kind of the same, and I think it'll take a little bit of time. But at some point, hopefully the field closes up. What I think all we actually want to have happen is that if a top team has a bad day, then a third place team, Mercedes or a Ferrari, can more easily win a race. That's what we really want to see. Is that if Mercedes drop the ball on strategy, or Red Bull and Mercedes, it's not impossible for another team to win a race. That's what we really want to see, right?
And I think we had a number of that stuff last season. That was great. Like Esteban won that race. We all wanted to see it.
Yeah, that was quite a significant dropping of the ball. I mean, it just if they that's when they kick the ball completely off the pitch. But if it was where they just get the strategy a bit wrong, that's where the Mercedes and McLaren get the strategy right, then they're in for a chance to win more regularly. I think is what we'd like to see as a minimum.
We like seeing those other guys win and just take advantage of those opportunities. I think it's great for the sport. Well, we love it as fans. It's so unpredictable. Yes. But wow, I think that wraps up our F1 preview, Matthew. But we want to give you the floor again, I guess, to invite people to watch your show. Say hello to your fan club if you have one, your family and friends. We can give you the floor again.
Thank you. It's been great to chat with you. I really appreciate it. And your enthusiasm for the sport is really infectious. And as I said at the beginning, there are no people more important to the sport than fans. So who the hell are you? Or who the heck are you? You're the people that count.
Oh my God.
I would encourage you to tune in to Go F1, and we also take questions on Twitter and other platforms later this year as we roll out some new features. We really want to interact with the fans and our viewers, and we've got some exciting ideas coming up later on. But in the meantime, you can definitely send us questions on Twitter and enjoy. Alex is always good value. And as I mentioned, we've got Craig Scarborough on for the Bahrain Grand Prix on Sunday night, so it should be a great show.
I'll make sure to tune in. And we just want to say, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. We love this chat. We're heading into a new F1 season, and we're just thinking in a different way as fans. Thanks to you. We just want to say thank you so much for your time, and all the best. Yes,
my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind if we can just put you backstage and then we'll just close the show. Yeah. All right. I don't know what to say, but I wish we could time jump to Saturday qualifying. Heck, even Friday practice. I watch Friday practice if some people don't. So please don't judge me, but that's what I do. So, guys, what do you think?
I won't judge you.
F1 Kwentuhan, F1 chat. I'm
ready.
ready.
I'm learning. I'm learning
I'm
more.
ready.
Yeah, I wanna listen to this show so I could, after every race, I'll be able to give more analysis when we have the show.
Yeah.
And I like his tire answer, so which means I'm really, really keen on putting more air on my tires and fixing that. It was 18. Imagine that. I got scared.
It's pretty low, eh? Yeah, exactly.
Slow. And I felt it. I felt it in my car. So, but I like it. I was more of a student now than the host, which is good.
And let's not forget, of course, we have Raymond too, Karter of the Year. I go to Raymond for oh no, I think there's something wrong with my car. I go to Raymond, I go to my dad. Hi, Tito Bong. Thanks for watching. Yes. Raymond, great episode, right? We got to change up the way you think. And you're an experienced guy already, but Matthew just brought so much to the table.
Yeah, there's so much I've learned, especially the inside of F1.
So many things, things.
Are you gonna change the way you drive now next time you hit the racetrack? I don't know. Question, of course. Yes.
I do want to say to Matty, when he's here in the Philippines, I think you could hear us now, Matthew. Let's go karting, and I'll just watch. I'll watch you and Raymond. Race. Probably Claudio will race with you, so I'll just be in the paddock watching you guys. But we should go and hit the racetrack.
Yeah. Hopefully, a bunch of kart tracks are about to open or reopen in Metro Manila. So maybe we can do all the we can have the F1 Nerd Fest there with the F1
Definitely.
Club of the Philippines. Yes. So it's great, guys. I think we can wrap up this episode. We'll just run the OBB and meet Matthew backstage. Cara
Yes,
Manzano here in behalf of Claudia Perrine. We got
I made
Raymond
it.
Cudala. Of course. I know, right? You said the fastest lap. No, I'm just kidding.
I
You
missed
drove
it.
safely. Just drive
Yeah.
safe on the road, right? It's only racing on the track. So that does it. So we will catch you in our next episode. Make sure to stay tuned. Oh, thanks a lot, Jed. You just make sure to give us a follow. We'll try to keep giving you all that fantastic stuff. Hope you had a blast. Peace out, guys.